Alessandro, thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
All right, man. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Now, I appreciate you doing this. It was very last minute. I think I only reached out to you 2 days ago, or was it yesterday? The last few days has been a
Yeah,
blur, but man, I appreciate you doing this so quickly.
it's my pleasure to be here.
So, for a bit of a background, I saw a conversation you had on Instagram Live with a buddy of mine, Dr. Joseph Yee, and hearing from you exactly what it was like over there in your experience was mind blowing for me personally, because obviously when you're dealing with China, you don't really know what's going on there. You only know what they want you to know. So what I was seeing from your page, obviously I went on there and followed you, and I was looking at your stories, and I could see that you're in that facility in Shanghai, and seeing that firsthand, um, mate, I was lost for words, and I couldn't believe the way they treat people in there. It's probably worse. It's just as bad, if not worse, than jail. So
There's a lot of similarities, yeah.
yeah, definitely. Even the bathrooms, like I think in jail you probably get a better bathroom than what you get in that facility. It's mind blowing. But so I wanted to talk to you about obviously your experience there and how that happens over there. So how you obviously you test positive, then you end up in that facility, how
Mhm.
that happens and what it's like. So what what date were you? So was it just did you test yourself, or was it a PCR test over there? How did you find out you had COVID the first time?
Sure. So the first time I found out that I was positive to COVID was through an antigen test that they sent me at home. And yeah, I took the test. So that was the 26th of March, and I got the two lines.
Yep.
Eventually, they came to my door. So by the way, from that moment, they just said, "Do not leave your home. Just stay there."
So
And
did you have to register that result?
so okay, the way let me take a step back. The way that it works here in China is that pretty much from the beginning of March, they started doing regular PCR tests to people, and eventually you actually by mid March you needed a negative PCR test result in order to access some buildings. For example, I needed a negative PCR result to access my work building. I needed a negative PCR result every 48 hours to access my gym. So they were they were not, it wasn't mandatory, but they were somewhat forcing you to go and do these PCR tests. And then cases just started increasing, positive cases started increasing in Shanghai. And on the 26th of March, actually, I did accompany my girlfriend to hospital to get a PCR test because she was feeling unwell. And obviously all of this was happening when we had no clear idea of how China was going to be handling this virus. So I brought her to the hospital on the 26th. She didn't get her result yet, but then they sent us an antigen test at home. Mine was positive, hers was negative. But then eventually it turns out that she tested positive from that PCR test that she did on 26th of March. And I eventually ended up testing positive via PCR test on the 28th of March. What happened then is kind of nuts, because basically on the 28th of March, my girlfriend gets taken away from home because she tested positive first.
So
And
what do you mean taken away? Do you mean so they obviously they're
right.
aware of the positive result.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so how do you have to register that, or is that already documented from the hospital?
So, well, if it's documented by the hospital, everything is in the cloud. Everything is stored into a database that I suppose pretty much anyone working in the medical environment would be able to have access to. So if you go to one of these hospitals to take a PCR test, they would know. Eventually, they came to my door to take the PCR test. And obviously, in that case, it was still, the information was stored in the cloud and everyone could see it. Everyone knew that both me and my girlfriend were positive. She was positive first by PCR. I tested positive afterwards by PCR. She was taken away on the 28th of March and brought to one of these facilities. And I was taken away eventually on the 9th of April, almost 2 weeks later. The reason for that being that when she was kind of unlucky when she went to do that test at the hospital, because it turns out that her name just ended up at the top of a list. Meanwhile, my name, having done the PCR test a couple of days later, went at the bottom of a list. And so when when they started going through this list and bringing positive cases to these isolation centers, she was taken away pretty much immediately. When it was my turn, there were not enough bed spaces left. They were already packed with people and they had no facility in which they could put me in. And so they made me wait and wait and wait and wait at home. The last PCR positive result that I had was from the 2nd of April. Then on the 5th of April, they sent me an antigen test at home, where the result is negative. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm gonna be able to, avoid going to COVID camp. But then no words until the 9th of April. And the 9th of April, my community manager, the community manager is the guy that manages the whole community, my compound where I live in. He just sends me a message and says, they're gonna come and pick you up today. And eventually at 1:30, they start blasting this megaphone at the entrance of my building, just telling me to come down. And so I had my luggage ready and everything, and I just leave because, I comply with Chinese laws and regulations because I'm a guest here. I'm not in Italy. I'm not a Chinese person. I have to abide by their rules and regulations. So yeah, I just went and my adventure started basically.
Yeah. So when they come and get you, obviously it's not optional. You can't just say, oh, listen, I elect to stay at home and get better at home. It doesn't work like that there. Obviously not.
No, that would be, sorry guys. I really appreciate if you could leave me at home and recover. No, I don't think they would get that. And again, I didn't. There was no resistance from my side, but I know some Chinese people did resist being taken away, and they were just, people entering their homes and being taken away by force. So I think maybe if I had refused, they would have called the police, they would have banged at my door, but they would have never dared to come inside a foreigner's place. I don't know about that. At the same time, for what I just said, okay, I'll just do it because you guys say it. This changes my perspective on China completely. I'll deal with it. I'll go to COVID camp, but then, it's a bye-bye for me because being treated like this, I think even Chinese people didn't like being taken away from their homes and put in this facilities that, as you were mentioning before, they're far from, being a good place for people to heal. Yeah. It's crazy. It's like thousands of individuals at very close contact in very unhealthy conditions, just waiting for the virus to leave their body. No medical treatment whatsoever. So
it's crazy. And when I've seen that, I'm thinking it's a gross violation of your human rights. Absolutely. Not even up for debate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even obviously to the Chinese people, I mean, you don't treat a human being like that. You're getting treated essentially like animals, right? And what surprised me the most is that there hasn't been a single word about that from any Western leader, the United States, Australia, Canada, the UK. It's been very quiet. I'm thinking, how can that, because it's not exactly hidden, like we all know what's happening there. How is it that can happen? And the Western leaders aren't condemning China for the way they're treating human beings, because as I said, it's terrible. It's more like how you would treat a sick animal rather than a sick person. And okay, so they've picked you up and they've taken you, and obviously you said there wasn't bed, so you had to just wait at home. So when eventually you did end up in the facility, what's that like inside that facility when you first enter that?
Yeah. So I arrived at the center at 2 a.m. on the 10th of April. And, you go in, they write down your details, your name, your passport number. Do you have any symptoms? They get you to sign a sort of a paper where they state that you're not supposed to receive any sort of medical treatment unless you're about to die, basically. And
they expect you to sign that.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yes, they do. Otherwise, I think they can refuse to accept you in that facility. And the reason why I actually wanted to go into one of those facilities is because I had spent the whole day being bounced around. I went to a first facility twice, and I was refused twice because in the first instance, I said I couldn't speak English nor Chinese, and they didn't want to accept me for that reason. But then I spent 7 hours in a bus. They brought me back to the same facility at 9 in the evening, at 9 at night. And in that case, I was like, okay, guys, I speak English. I'm sorry for what I said before. Just give me a bed. I want to go to sleep now because I know I'm not going to get out of this. And they were just like, no, we cannot accept you here. This facility is not good for a foreigner. The conditions inside are terrible. And I asked them, is it good enough for a Chinese? What are you talking about? Obviously, they didn't answer back, and they put me back in the bus. Anyways, when I reached the second facility at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was just like, okay, this is home for the next few days. I don't know what else I'm going to do. I was late at night, so I just wanted to get some sleep, and I decided the next day to just have a walk around and see the place. But yeah, it just felt like my dignity was taken away from me. I was taken away from my home. I had a whole journey to get to one of these isolation center, and I had an idea of what was coming to me, what to expect, because my girlfriend had already been in one of these centers for a long while, and there's common traits amongst all of these facilities. But yeah, I was just like, let's deal with this. I'm gonna make some noise because I don't think anybody should be treated this way. And I don't want to be political about this. I just want to show images of how people are being treated. I don't want to make any comments on the government. As an individual, I don't think this is the way to go. I think this is, as you were also mentioning, it's mistreating people. It's treating people. I felt like cattle, animals. Yeah. And worst thing, it has an effect on their psychological well-being, on their mental health. My girlfriend, especially, she actually wrote some pretty thoughtful and deep posts on Instagram about her state of mind, about her mental health after 19 days in one of these places. And you sleep 4 or 5 hours per night because it's super loud, and my neighbor was terrible. He liked to blast his phone at full volume at 4 a.m. in the morning.
I've seen those stories.
And then the lights were kept on 24/7. I mean, I need darkness, and science also proved that you should be trying to avoid light as much as possible from like 10 at night until 6 in the morning. You need a good amount of sunlight, but artificial light like this on the whole night is no good for the human brain, is no good for the human well-being. So yeah, it's a combination of things that just make me think this was all a political decision, and the individual, the human being, and their well-being was not even kept in mind when this whole plan was designed.
And it hasn't been like that forever. So when did they start? So how long have you been in China, and when did they start sending people to these facilities?
I've been in China for it's going to be 7 years in September this year.
Oh, wow.
So 6 years and a half now. And up until March, I think the first facility, I first heard about these facilities on the 20th of March, 2022. Up until then, my experience in China was actually really good. Sure. Before 2020, before COVID started, it was amazing because I was traveling a lot with work, and I got a lot of satisfaction, and I was enjoying life. I was working on my career, getting a lot of experience. Then 2020 happened, and things closed up here in China. So initially we were actually in a safe spot, because I remember Shanghai recovering from the first wave of COVID in February 2020, around mid-March. Around mid-March, we were already going to club nights, and restaurants were opening again. And eventually China fully recovered, and the rest of the world started struggling with COVID. So actually we were in a good position. And then even in the past couple of years, there were some waves of COVID, but they were always manageable, especially here in Shanghai. They would always find them at the very beginning, put everything under control, isolate areas of the city, and nobody had any problems with COVID. Now, this particular strain of Omicron is very, very it's easily transmittable, more easily transmittable. And therefore it just confused the whole system, and they were not prepared for a virus this easily transmittable. So yeah, things have changed dramatically, and I think they are not going to get better than this, because sure, this time it's this Omicron that it's easily transmittable, but death rates have been very low. What if it's easily transmittable and death rates are going to be very high? I mean, this reaction of the Chinese government has been very I mean, it seems like they're just very unprepared for this, and they really did not know exactly what to do. And I'm afraid of what's coming next, because, if this situation is bad now, surely it can get better, and I really hope it gets better for everyone else, but it could get also worse. I don't want to be around when that happens.
Oh, of course, it could definitely get worse. But as you said, let's hope that this is sort of the back end of it now.
For sure.
But it's incredible because, the first glimpse I saw of COVID here in Australia, the first thing we saw was people in Wuhan who were just collapsing on the streets, right? And I think now we all know that that doesn't happen. Like, I'm yet to see another instance of that in any other place on the planet besides in Wuhan. You haven't seen that anywhere else. So you would have to assume that that was fabricated. Why? I don't know, but you don't see people just collapsing walking down the street. So there's been a lot of mystery sort of surrounding it in terms of what's going on over there. And it has been quiet. Like, we haven't heard much from China throughout the entire thing, besides, initially, and obviously now in Shanghai with the facility. 2021, the back end of 2020, I guess, it's been fairly quiet. As to what's going on over there. And you just explained why that is. I mean, they've seemed to have handled it pretty well, pretty comfortably. But only the other day I saw images of temporary fencing being erected through Shanghai. Is that happening?
Is that temporary? That's my question. Well, it is happening, yes.
It looks like temporary fencing, but whether they've got plans, who knows?
Jokes aside, yes, there have been fences being put up around certain streets in Shanghai. And I guess I'm assuming the main reason for that is either to make sure that people don't leave their compounds or their apartments and go out in the city, especially if they could test positive and they could spread the virus even further. Or it could also be because there's a lot of every day, basically, people in compounds and buildings are asked to come down to do a PCR test. So every day I get waken up, or I hear the usual, megaphone saying this message: everybody come down and get your PCR test. Everybody get down and get your PCR test. And this applies to everyone here in Shanghai. Everyone is supposed to get those PCR tests done. So I'm assuming that these fences could also be to make sure that, people line up correctly on the street. They just don't go around. It's all a matter of containment, though. And it is true. It is also true that people are not happy with this, especially when the fences have been put in front of an entrance of a building. I don't know if you've seen some photos of, this green fences being put at an entrance of a building and people doing PCR tests from the fence. So the one side, the nurses doing the PCR test, and on the other side of the fence, the people living in the building coming down for the PCR test. And I've also seen videos of people. Yeah, for us at least, I know it's for sure every day. I'm assuming all of the other communities and buildings would be doing it every day. And that's a lot of waste.
Like, is it optional? Like, can you say, "Oh no, I don't want it"?
So it's interesting you mentioned this, because today we received a message from one of those general, I guess, Chinese numbers. I think it may be from the government. I don't know, but it says that everybody should come down and do the PCR test. And if you don't do the PCR test, there is your code. We have a special code here, a health code here in Shanghai, which basically allows us to enter buildings. So usually if we go to a shopping center, for example, they would ask you at the entrance, show me your code. Now, if your code is green, no problem. If it's yellow, you may have a problem. If it's red, I'm going to call the police on you right now. So this message that we received today, it says that if you don't come down to do that PCR test, your code is going to turn from green to yellow. If it's red, no problem. You can stay red for a while. I'm red code, so I'm like the worst. But so people's code are going to be changed in color. And, eventually you can refuse. I guess you can refuse to come down. But when things open up, you will have a very hard time going around, and you will still have to do those PCR tests. So, yeah, they are not forcing you, but they are kind of forcing you. in a way.
Yeah,
That makes
similar.
sense.
Yeah, I understand. It's similar to what's happening over here with the vaccine mandates. They're not holding you down and forcing you to take it, but they're you know, what option do you have? You know, if you don't take it,
Mm.
you're not going to be able to live your life, and that's what's happened here. But I mean, over there with vaccination, what are they like with vaccination? Are they, you know, do you have to be vaccinated in order to go to the shops and for dinner, or?
It's interesting here. The vaccine is not mandatory, and I know quite a few people, me included, that haven't done the vaccine here in China. So from that perspective, I guess, you know, they give the freedom for people to not get a vaccine. I don't know what's the main reason behind that. There have been studies that I was reading that show that the Chinese vaccine is way less effective than others that are available outside. But ultimately, I have a feeling that they are a bit scared of forcing something like that on the population, because already there are some, you know, people, some sort of revolts or some dissent coming from the people now that they're being closed in their apartments. But technically, it's for the good of everyone, right? However, the vaccine, I don't know. I don't think maybe a lot of people agree it's for the good of everyone, and being forced to inject something that they don't want to get injected with maybe could cause some proper disruption to the whole system. But that's just my opinion on this. To answer your question, Chinese vaccine is not mandatory, and actually even for traveling and stuff, you don't need one. Before this whole COVID situation happened, you could easily travel just by showing one or two negative PCR tests in a row.
Okay, so have people been, you know, are forced out of work? You know, is there conditions on employment that you have to be vaccinated to work at certain places or in certain industries?
Not at all. Not as far as I know. And I would need to double check on the teachers side of thing, but I do think that teachers also don't necessarily need to be vaccinated. Don't take this for like 100% truth, because I haven't double checked. But in my case, and in my girlfriend's case, we don't need a vaccine to be able to work. And we work for a music company, so I guess, yeah, we're not really in contact with a lot of people, but at the same time, it's not mandatory, and therefore we don't do it for the moment.
Yeah, well, I'll look into that some more myself, because it's very interesting. Because over here, like, you know, I was working in mental health, and I had my employment terminated back in August last year for not getting vaccinated. And that's just you know, they've done the same thing. There's vaccine mandates for teachers, for nurses, for you know, health, obviously, disability, mental health, hospitals, GPs, medical centers, the rest of it. And there are a lot of industries, as I said, including teachers, childcare workers, even supermarkets have mandated it on their staff. So people are getting sacked from supermarkets if they haven't had the vaccine. So it is enforced over here, which it sounds like it's not a massive thing over there, which is bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that they would force it, and maybe things are going to change after this. But still, a lot of people that have vaccinated have still contracted COVID and are still able to pass it around. Surely the effects on them may be diminished because of the virus, but at the same time, it's not a deterrent. It hasn't proven to be a deterrent here yet. So we'll see what they will be doing in the future. I'm not sure about what's the policy on that, what's the strategy on that. But yeah, you would think that because they want to have a zero COVID policy, that eventually they may end up asking / forcing people to get vaccinated at some point.
Yeah, I'm just very surprised that it's not worse over there. So it seems like it's worse over here in Australia, and I think a few other countries like the US and the UK than what it is in China, which is incredible. You would never think that the Western countries have mandates when China doesn't, but it just goes to show you the way it's so political. It's this whole thing has become, it's almost entirely political. It's not about health, it's political. And you know, it's very unfortunate, and especially for yourself and for your partner to have been through that. I mean, that facility in itself, so there's no bathrooms in there. Like, there's no showers and baths. Is there? It's just like a sink, from what I could see. Is that right?
Yeah, sink and squat toilets. So basically, yeah, if you wanted to go to the bathroom, you have a squat toilet. But then if you want to wash yourself, I washed my hair under a sink, and I used like a bucket, filled it with water, got my towel, sink the towel in the bucket, and then wash myself like this, basically.
Wow, that's crazy. You get shower, even in jail, you get showers. That's why it's incredible that this is looked at like and the fact that there's no treatment offered. And not only that, obviously artificial lighting. Do you get much time to go outside? And because I've seen that you were exercising a little bit. How much time do you get outdoors? Is that as much as you want, or only when they say?
Only when they say, but I have to give it to them that they were giving us quite some freedom when it came to going outside. I know, like in my girlfriend's center, she didn't get that much time outside, especially at the beginning. They wouldn't let her out that much, maybe 1 or 2 hours a day. But in my center, apart from that one day where I don't know what came across their mind, but they said after just 1 hour that we were outside, everyone come in, and they didn't let anyone out for the rest of the day. Usually we could roam outside quite freely. So yeah, we were, I guess, lucky from that perspective. But yeah, the bathrooms and the showers is just it's kind of camping style. I don't know, camping without showers, I guess.
Yeah, and I seen the food as well. Like I don't know how you ate that. Half of a few of the meals that you posted up, that they get served, like breakfast gets served in plastic bags.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of waste. But apart from that, I wasn't eating that much anyways, because, well, I'm a flexitarian. I try to avoid meat as much as possible, but in that situation, I was avoiding the meat almost completely, and yeah, trying to get some carbs in with the rice and the veggies. But I did lost, I think, a couple of kilos in 6 days, because I was eating way less than my usual. I'm 1.86 meters, so I usually eat quite a lot.
Yeah,
but yeah,
same height, exactly the same height as I am, so I know what it's like. But I ate quite a bit, but it's horrible. So okay, so you've got COVID again now. So how come this time they're not picking you up? Because you have COVID right now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tested positive on the 22nd of April. I don't feel bad. I'm perfectly normal, but yeah, technically I still have COVID.
So and it's weird, how come they're not taking you to the facility?
Well, that is a good question. And so I've had a chat with a person from my office who's responsible with all the government communications and connections. And she knows someone from the health care system, I guess. And this person is aware that once you get COVID for the first time, there can be traces of the virus that stay in you for quite some time. And therefore, for this reason, I hope that they will not be taking me away. However, I don't have the certainty at 100% until I receive a call from the CDC here, and I get told what to do. I'm assuming in the best case scenario, they'll just wait a little bit longer. Now it's been 4 days since my last PCR test. They'll wait maybe a couple of more days, and they'll send someone to do another PCR test. If they want to play it by the books, I suppose I have to go back to quarantine camp, but I hope they won't. For me, for myself, but also for them, because I'm gonna make a mess out of it if they send me back to those quarantine isolation centers.
Well, I hope for you as well, obviously, that you don't get transported back there, because you've only been out of there now for a little while. So hopefully they leave you alone and you get to stay where you are. And as I said, it's very unlikely. I was saying before we went on and recorded that it's very unlikely that you would have caught COVID again that close to your previous infection. Yeah. It's almost certainly just traces of your last COVID infection. So hopefully they leave you alone and let you be. But it's incredible. So what's your thoughts in terms of moving forward? I mean, are you happy to stay in China considering the circumstances, or are you going to try and get back to Italy?
We are going back to Italy. When that is going to happen, it's unclear, because we have a cat as well. Right now she's at a friend's house, but we need to prepare the documents for the cat to leave. And right now we're in home quarantine, like home lockdown. We cannot leave our house. All the probably places where we could go and get those documents are all closed. So that may take a bit. I wanted to try and help the landlord who's not here in China at the moment to sell this apartment as well. And there may be a project at work that I want to finish before I leave. So we're looking at end of October, beginning of November, the latest. However, if things start going sideways, even more than what they are now, we're going to be trying and leave earlier and, carry on with our lives. And obviously
Not sure what happened then. It just decided to cut us off. But okay, so you're sorting out the paperwork for your CAD, and hopefully you're heading back to Italy. Will you come back to China again after what you've gone through here in the last few months?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about it, but I think it's going to be hard anyways for quite some time, because even now it's really complicated to come back to China. I know a few people that work in China, have contracts here in China, and they are struggling to be able to come back to China. Plus, it's really expensive too. So
It's expensive, is it?
Yeah. Because they have so many. So flying outside of China, you can get away with it with maybe 600, 700 euros.
Yeah.
But coming back to China, that already bumps up the price to like 2,000, even 3,000 euros. I've heard. So it's an investment. And I guess it's an investment that I wouldn't be thinking about for quite some time. When things settle down, I'd love to come back to China and just, say hi.
Yeah.
Have some fun around in the streets, no lockdowns. But it's with this zero COVID policy, I have a feeling that they are going to be keeping things the way they are for quite some time. Specifically international travel, it's going to be very complicated. So I want to settle down elsewhere, but I wouldn't mind coming back to China at some point. 6 years here, a lot of memories, and probably good reason to come back at some point as well.
Of course, it's a large chunk of your life that you've spent over there, and it's such a shame. This pandemic has destroyed the lives of so many people, and in different ways. I mean, it's very unfortunate that, because from what I understand, you seem to have been loving it over there, having a great time, and you really enjoyed yourself until COVID started. But this zero COVID strategy that China have, it's, they've tried that here in Australia in different various states, and it's almost impossible. It'd be like trying to stop the flu, right? It's probably not going to happen. And I guess ultimately the victims of that policy are people like yourself and the Chinese people who are having their lives turned upside down every time there's a new variant.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but I mean, it's what can you do? I mean, so Shanghai, where you are now, has that been pretty good? So he did say it was pretty good up until recently.
Yeah.
So they've
it
kept
seems
a lot
like
of it.
Oh, sorry.
I think that they kept a lot of it in and around Wuhan for the majority.
There's been a few cases popping up in Xi'an towards the end of 2021. I think that was December 2021 or beginning of 2022. And now it feels that it's spreading around the country. I think Beijing is going to be soon going into lockdown mode, similar to Shanghai, hoping for them to prevent a similar situation. But before that, I guess the major outbreaks would have been in Wuhan for sure, Xi'an, and now Shanghai. That's what I personally know about. But yeah, zero COVID policy, it's a tricky one. It's a fight against Mother Nature. That's why I think it's going to be really, really hard. Humans against, politics against Mother Nature. I don't think it's going to pan out well for them.
No, and in terms of what you hear over there in China, obviously you have Facebook and Instagram and all the rest of it. You can access, but in terms of the Chinese media, do they speak about what's happening in other parts of the world much?
In other parts of the world, I'm not entirely sure. I think the propaganda here is more aimed at making the what's happening in the West look bad. America is bad, NATO is bad. The virus was brought in by an American scientist who did experiments in China, and that's why there was an outbreak in Wuhan. So yeah, the media's attention is probably mostly focused on trying to diverge the attention on what the problem is here in Shanghai. I do have a feeling that people that just watch news on television would actually not know what's going on in Shanghai right now. Luckily, we have well, the digital community here is very strong. And although videos get taken down fairly quickly, they can still spread and people can still be aware of what's going on about the fences, about the COVID isolation centers, about people being taken away by force. These videos have been shared, and I'm actually 100% sure that especially the kids, they wouldn't know what's going on. But again, from knowing what's going on and actually not being okay with it, it's a big step. And China doesn't really have a history of being too revolutionary, I guess, especially in the past few years. But ultimately, that is also because they had a good life. They had their mobile phones, they had a decent income, they could go out and eat food with friends. Pretty much the vast majority of people living in China. So they didn't have much to complain. Now with this whole situation, maybe some of those revolutionary fires will be rekindled, but we'll see. I think in the next 2 to 3 weeks we'll start seeing how this how this plays out properly.
Now, so you mentioned there that the American scientists, what's their official story on in China anyway as to how this virus started? Because there's theories of it coming from the wet market in Wuhan. There's theories of it leaking from the biolab in Wuhan. There's many, and most recently, there's a documentary going around. It's called Watch the Water, and where they actually, I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh yeah, I've seen it being passed around, and I wanted to watch it, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, where they reckon it's some sort of, the virus itself is cobra venom. So there's many different theories as to what's actually happened. So what's the Chinese official story as to how it started? Just out of curiosity, because I have no idea.
I don't know sure. The official one, and again, I haven't gone around and asked too many people because most of the information was actually coming from my neighbor, who anyways watches a lot of national television and is an older man. So like he's probably in his 70s. So it's the kind of perfect target for, I guess, propaganda. And I remember this time, my girlfriend was speaking to him because my Chinese is not that good, but she mentioned him saying that it was an American scientist who came to Wuhan to do some sort of experiments, and then he brought the virus with him on something on these lines. But at this idea that it's always someone else's fault is actually very typical throughout Chinese media and television, because I guess I am not a scientist. I also read that this virus could have started from Wuhan, the wet market. Now you're telling me it's cobra venom. So there's a lot of different opinions about it. And I guess truth is going to be the real one is never going to be 100% sure unless, it's proven by science itself and by facts. But yeah, if you ask me, I have a feeling it all started from Wuhan and from that wet market. From my experience, from what I was reading, even, what was it? We were talking about this here in China already in December. There was a friend of mine, I remember he shared with me this article about the wet market in Wuhan. And he was like, oh, this could be a big thing. And I was like, no, come on, man. It's going to be okay. So it turns out it wasn't. Wow. But yeah. If you ask me, I think it probably came from that wet market in Wuhan. But again, there's so many theories and people see it with such a different way. I think if you ask older Chinese generation, they would probably stick with the fact that it was coming from a foreigner and it was brought into China, so it wasn't their fault.
Yeah, it's because there's definitely been deception. That 100%, there's definitely been deception in the sense where it's become evident as time's gone on that China were aware of this virus well before they spoke about it publicly. They tried shutting it down, a month or two before we had heard about it. They were trying to suppress it. And then when we did hear about it, we're getting bombarded with the videos of people collapsing in the street in Wuhan, just walking, and next minute they're just collapsing face first on the ground. As I said, I haven't seen that in Australia or reported anywhere else in the world besides China. So you would have to suspect that that's a lie. Like, we know now that people don't just collapse in the middle of the day from
Yeah.
COVID. So there's definitely been a level of deception from the get-go. The question, I think, is why? Like, if it's a virus and it got out from a lab, or it was a part of, from the wet market, like you seem to believe it is, then that's okay. It is what it is. Just try and better prepare the world, and use this as a lesson for the future to make sure it doesn't happen again. But instead, there was, as I said, deception. There was lies. There was cover-ups. There was a whole range of things in play. Now, I am aware that China like to protect their reputation. I get that. And that's their business, obviously, that they run the country as they like. But, the fact that there's been no finger pointing, there's been no, obviously with what's happening now in Ukraine with Russia, we can see that the Western leaders are sanctioning Russia. They're blaming Russia and they're going hard on them. But there's been none of that from the West towards China, which I find very bizarre in itself. So look, who knows? It's a mystery in terms of this. Go on.
I have a feeling that the world still needs China for a lot of things, technology, goods that China has been exporting for the last years. You could argue the same for Russia about the oil and the gas, but at the same time, Russia attacked another country. China is kind of keeping it within its own borders. So, yeah, I suppose nobody really wants to piss off these big powers, these big countries. But in the case of Russia, what Russia did is out of this world, and it's despicable. And it's good that they're sanctioning them, because I hope it's going to pay out and it's going to make a difference. But when it comes to China, it's what are they going to sanction them for? For stating that the virus didn't come from China? That doesn't work too well, I think, and it would look a little bit ridiculous, maybe. So as long as China keeps it within its own borders, I think people are going to be looking at China like, what are you guys doing? But I guess as long as you keep it within your own territory, that's fine by me.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. Obviously Russia and China being allies, what are you hearing about the war from the Chinese media? Are they sort of quiet on the issue? Are they painting a different picture?
They're not quiet on the issue. I mean, there's a lot of propaganda in favor of Russia, which is one of the other reasons why we are actually looking into leaving the country, because my girlfriend is Ukrainian. So I'm biased. I'm biased for a good reason, but I'm biased. And, this whole propaganda in favor of Russia, again, against America, against NATO, because they need to support their, I guess, commie buddies. I don't know. It's just not something that resonates well with us. And even working in China and being in China, it's starting to feel like, am I contributing to that war on the wrong side? It makes you think. And I think a lot of people are going to start realizing that the more China gets closer to Russia. I honestly hope that China, even though they try to keep the propaganda in favor of Russia, because, Xi Jinping's friendship with Putin is above all sort of limits. So they want to keep that image there. But I do hope that they will not give any sort of, support in terms of weapons, in terms of manpower. If the support keeps coming from a media perspective, I'm not okay with it, but you guys do you. If the support starts coming from a military perspective, then that's when we have a big problem. And I think a lot of people, apart from the fact that a lot of people are planning to leave now China because of this whole COVID situation, Shanghai in particular, I think if China really does get closer to Russia and makes it, public, then a lot of people may be leaving China for that reason as well, to not contribute to a war on the wrong side of things.
Yeah, well, I think if they do, I mean, the minute they start, supporting them with weapons, and then that'll cause a massive worldwide issue.
Yeah.
It'll almost be looked at like a calling for war. That's how I think the West would take that if China were to assist Russia with weapons and military assistance. So let's hope, for the sake of everyone, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. It's very unlikely, in my opinion, but there is a chance, unfortunately.
So your partner's from Ukraine. So how is she? Is her family, everyone safe? Or obviously hope they're all good.
They're doing good. They're doing good. Yeah, and they're in Zaporizhia, which is one of those cities on the southeast, very close to one of the nuclear plants that was talked about in the news. And yeah, the city, the part of town where her parents live, there she is. It was just bombed. Sorry, that's news for me now. Yeah, but her parents are okay, I suppose. But I hope so. Yeah. But okay, she's not doing great,
No.
and
I'm very sorry
the
to
whole
hear that.
situation.
Please send my best wishes to her and her family.
I will.
But listen, on that note, I'll leave you with it. Obviously, there's something's going on there, so
thank you.
I'll let you have a talk to your partner about it. But again, make sure, please, send my best wishes to her and her family. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I hope that
likewise,
this is the end of it for you, and that you get on with your life and you can get out of China and back to some form of normality soon. But Alessandro, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, and stay strong.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.